Thank you, everyone, for joining us today and your interest in learning more about the Effective Leadership Essentials with Kelly Meerbott, who is the Executive Leadership Coach and CEO at You Loud and Clear. My name is Lynette Clement, and I am the Program Director for the Online Master of Science in Human Capital Development Program, as well as the Online Bachelor of Arts in Organizational Leadership Program. So these programs are the programs that are providing you with this free webinar today. We ask that you take this time now to mute your microphone so that there's no background noise during the presentation. So the presentation will be recorded as well as archived, and you will receive the recording after the end of the session. So again, the program is brought to you by the Online Master of Science in Human Capital Development Program, which is aligned with SHRM's HR curriculum. The program is a 2-year program. We offer courses in an 8-week online format, and the GRE or GMAT are not requirements for this program. We also are another sponsor for this webinar is our Online Bachelor of Arts in Organizational Leadership Program, which is our undergraduate program. So the Human Capital Development Program is a master's program, and the Organizational Leadership Program is a Bachelor of Arts program that is fully online for working adult professionals. And each program offers a condensed format, so the program is offered in a 7-week online format. So if you have any questions regarding either the Organizational Leadership Program or the Human Capital Program, reach out to me after today's session. So again, today's professional development webinar on Effective Leadership Essentials is brought to you by our guest speaker, Kelly Meerbott. Kelly is a respected thought leader, author, facilitator, speaker, and leadership coach to successful corporate executives. Her customized approach has demonstrated measurable results, improving company morale as well as productivity, streamlining communication processes, and eliminating politics, all while maintaining a focus on increasing profitability. So Kelly earned a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature. She completed some postgraduate work in emotional intelligence, modern psychology, and leadership development. And in her spare time, she is creating an innovative virtual reality leadership development curriculum. Kelly is also a guest columnist for the Philadelphia Business Journal and Forbes. She is also the host of the Hidden Human, The Stories Behind the Business Leader podcast, and a featured speaker for Philly Tech and Color, as well as for the PA Conference for Women. In 2018, she was named the best person to get your life and business together by Philly Current magazine. Now is the time again to mute your microphones to avoid any feedback from background noise during the webinar. So the webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to you along with the HRCI recertification credit details at the end of today's webinar. So make sure that you log in with your name included so that I know to send you the HRCI credit information at the end of today's webinar. So I am now going to turn over the webinar to our guest speaker, Kelly Meerbott. We will save time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. You also can feel free to type in the chat box area if you have any comments or questions during the presentation. So welcome, Kelly, and thank you for sharing your time and expertise with us today.
Thank you so much, Lynette. I'm gonna try to do to grab the share from you. Oh, here we go. I'm the co-host now. All right, and I'm going to share my screen with you. Right here. Can everybody see that? Lynette, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you, Lynette and LaSalle and everybody who's taken the time out to spend with us today. I'm really thrilled to be here to share some knowledge about the skills you need to possess to make a positive impact in your leadership. And as Lynette and I were discussing, I really am all about serving and supporting people where they are. And this webinar is tailored to your needs. And I would like to share a few ground rules. Lynette has been kind enough to watch the chat box because I am not a good multitasker. So if you do have a question and you're not clear on a concept that I'm going to be pushing through today, because we're going to have a lot of information that's shared, please, interrupt and ask a question. And if I can't get to you, we'll definitely get your question at the end. So, what is it about leadership that makes people effective? This is our agenda that we're going to be going through. It's one thing to say that you're a leader, but how do you know you're effective? What quality do you need to possess to make a positive impact? In this webinar, we're going to go through the 6 essential components of leadership that will allow you to make the most out of your leadership skills in order to create a strong foundation. Each quality is a necessary building block in order to form the complex shape of leadership and allow it to come into being. And everybody's leadership skills look different because everybody is different, and that's great. We all want everyone's unique gifts and talents to rise to the surface, because that's the only way the world is going to work in the best way possible. So, what are the characteristics of a successful leader? Do you frequently conduct self-assessments and get introspective? What type of leader are you? What are your strengths and weaknesses? And how do you build upon those things? And how do you effectively lead in the workplace? As a leader, the people you manage will look to you for their emotional cues. As you demonstrate each skill and model the way for your team, one of 2 things will happen within the organization. And it's either the team is going to rise up to meet you and accept the challenge and help evolve and move along the way of leadership, or they're going to manage themselves out. Those are things that I've witnessed holistically throughout my career, which is now in its 21st year of doing this kind of work. And, if somebody rises up and becomes the best version of themselves under your care as a leader, that's a win. And if they manage themselves out of the organization without anybody having to fire them, that's a win as well. So, you really want to look to yourself and know yourself. And these are questions I would ask on a daily basis, to just check in and use a guidepost for your leadership. So what are the characteristics of a successful leader? The 6 skills that I've found are crucial to effective leadership are trust, transparency, accountability, commitment, humility, and learning from failure. Now, I listed those off because there are so many misconceptions about leadership. It's easy to develop mixed messages when we've observed inconsistent models throughout our lives. And here are, 10 common misconceptions. It's leaders are born, leadership is easy, leaders are always charismatic, leaders don't have to do any work. They just have the people around them, that will execute on whatever mandate they give. Leaders have the highest rank or title. Leaders just tell people what to do. And leadership is an ability given to a few. Leaders gain popularity by making people happy. None of that is true. And I can tell you that I speak from a place of knowledge and experience, because everything that I'm going to tell you today are things that I've learned that are field tested, first on me and then with my clients. So getting back to what I've listed out so far, what do you believe are the building blocks of great leadership? And, Lynette, if you can just let me know who's answering and what they're saying, that would be great.
Sure. So now is the time to type in the chat box area. So KJet says humility.
Mm-hmm.
Burrow says communication openly. Kelly also echoed communication. Empathy is also one of the building blocks of great leadership.
Yes. And I love humility. For me, I believe that the number one great building block that you need as a leader is trust. But all of those are great factors to make you a well-rounded, powerful, positively impactful leader.
We also
Anyone?
have authenticity
Yes.
as well as another communication. So communication was a big authenticity, empathy, and humility.
100%. And Lynette, since you are such a fantastic teacher and facilitator, what do you believe one of the great building blocks of leadership is?
I would say modeling the behavior that you want to see. And I know that's a whole sentence, but
Yes,
modeling the behavior that you want to see from your employees.
100%.
Being an example of the type of leader that you want to see.
100%. It's to me that's a hot button for me is when somebody says one thing and does another.
Exactly.
It's that out of alignment. And a lot of the great lessons that I've learned have been from leaders who've shown me what not to do. And
Exactly.
I'm really grateful for that example, because as humans we learn in contrast, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's what not to do. What would you do?
Right.
Let's be more authentic. Let's be clear communicators. Let's make sure that, we're modeling the proper behavior. And like I said before, people in organizations will look to their leaders for
Mm-hmm.
their emotional cues. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So all of these fold into each other. But as I said, here are the essential skills to leadership: trust, transparency, accountability, commitment, humility, and learning from failure. Um, so I'm going to break each one of these down for you. And please, as you're going through, ask questions in the chat box and just let me know. And if we can't get to you, we'll definitely get to you at the end of the presentation, because this is about you and your knowledge and being able to take one or two nuggets and apply them to your life or your business so that it can make an impact immediately. So here's our good friend, the Dalai Lama, and I love this. To earn trust, money and power aren't enough. You have to show some concern for others. So there's that empathy. You can't buy trust in the supermarket, and I've been in organizations where I've been called in where trust was present and then it suddenly wasn't. And you can work really, really hard to build trust, but one small thing can derail the whole organization. There are just a few elemental forces that hold our world together, and it's trust. Look around you. Open your eyes and really observe. There are so many things that are eroding our trust nowadays, and if we just really focused and worked on that, it would change our world. So, trust really cements relationships by allowing people to live and work together, feel safe, and belong to a group. Trust in a leader allows organizations and communities to flourish, while the absence of trust can cause fragmentation, division, conflict, and even war. That's why we need to trust our leaders, our family members, our friends, and our coworkers. Of course, those examples show different levels of trust, but I'm using it to reinforce how important trust is. And trust is hard to define, but we definitely know when it's lost. It's really an experiential thing. For me, when I know trust is broken, it manifests in physical sensations and emotions that rise up within me, whether it's a burning in my stomach or knots in my neck and shoulders, or the emotion that comes up is frustration. It's really a damaging thing when you lose trust. And what happens when we lose trust is we end up withdrawing our energy and level of engagement. And I've seen that happen numerous times in organizations. We go on an internal strike, not wanting to be sympathetic or empathetic to the person who we feel has hurt us or treated us wrongly. And we may not show it outwardly, but we're less likely to tell the formerly trusted person that we're upset, to share what is important to us, or to follow through on commitments. How many times have you done that where somebody's, broken your trust and you're just like, well, I'm not going to tell you anything ever again. And you literally shut down from the relationship. It's a very, very detrimental thing. And when your team trusts you as a leader, here's what happens. It increases the commitment to team goals, communication improves, ideas flow more freely, which increases creativity and productivity. And perhaps most important, in the hands of a trusted leader, employees are more comfortable with change and more willing to embrace a new vision because they know they're in the hands of somebody that is going to take care of them and is going to honor that trust.
But we have a question.
Sure.
So Rita asked, what do we do when we cannot trust our leader?
Ooh, that's a really, really good question. So for me, and I can only speak from where I come, Rita, and I hope this really helps you. And if not, Lynette, feel free to share my email with any of these attendees that may not be comfortable talking in this forum.
Okay.
But you can reach out to me. So Rita, if I don't answer your question, please feel free to email me afterwards. But what you do is you have to really ask yourself that question and take a hard look internally. For me, my work is my calling. It's who I am. It's what I was born to do. So if I can't trust a client, we have to either agree to make a commitment to work on rebuilding that trust or part ways, and for you, I don't know how long you've been in your organization, Rita, but I would sit down and be really brave and courageous and say, it seems to me that you're no longer trustworthy, or use the words that are, resonant for you, and say, I love this organization. I love the work we do, if that's true. And I'd like to work on rebuilding trust, or start looking for another organization to work for. Because trust is so, it is the cornerstone of everything. If your leader is taking you in a whole different direction, which I'll get to in another anecdote that I'm going to share with you later in the presentation, and it's an uncomfortable road, and you have to get comfortable being in that unknown. You need a leader that you can trust that's going to do the right thing. And if that's not present in your organization, I would say you need to make that decision for yourself. What's more important, trusting the leader, or finding another position where you can trust the leader. So let me give you an anecdote to kind of dovetail off of that answer. I worked with a client, a neurologist in Virginia, and he was consistently making bad hires. People would steal. People would treat the patients disrespectfully to the point of violating HIPAA regulations. They had tons of lawsuits out against their practice. And the practice's level of employee turnover, meaning the amount of people that quit, was at 55%. When I came in, I sat with the doctor, the head of the practice, to discuss what he believed the problem could be.
If you think you've witnessed a violation, give us a call at 212-442-4200.
Is that someone's speaker?
nyc.gov/ethics.
Yeah, that's some background noise.
Let me see if I can mute somebody's microphone.
Remember. There we go. Okay. So, when I sat with the doctor to discuss what he believed the problem could be, his response was, Kelly, I don't trust anybody. I don't trust anybody. So I want you to really think about that statement for a moment. And, when I sat there and allowed him to really think about that, I posed this question to him. If you're leading with distrust, what can you expect to get back from your team? If you're putting that energy out there, if everything's energy, right? And Einstein really believed it was. And those science junkies who can really, really get into the elemental things of our bodies, putting our bodies underneath a microscope, we're all energy. So if he's going into his organization already not trusting somebody out of the gate, then what do you think he's going to get back? People are going to match that energy. And I said that to him, and he thought about it for a moment. And I was really excited when he had the epiphany that he was the problem, because that's what it all came back to. So what we did was we co-created a plan to build trust on his team, to really focus on that. And 6 months later, turnover had dropped to 20%. Nobody was stealing. Those people had managed themselves out. And the level of trust between the team members was at an all-time high for their practice. They held each other accountable, stayed committed to being honest and focused on their mission, and they achieved more in that year that we worked together on building trust than in the prior 20 years the practice was in existence. So really, you really need to work on what kind of energy, what are you leading with? If you don't trust your people, then you need to look at what that wound is that is the root of the mistrust or the distrust, because you're bringing that into the organization. Okay. So then the next important building block is transparency, and Howard Schultz, former CEO of chairman and CEO of Starbucks, the currency of leadership is transparency. You have to be truthful. Again, transparency building on that trust. The role of transparency in leadership is not just to express every thought and emotion you have on a particular subject. Effective transparency is being open and honest about organizational struggles while demonstrating confidence and standing firm in your decisions as a leader. There has to be a balance between sharing what is necessary and building confidence within the staff to overcome these struggles. So you don't really need to tell them everything that's going on in your head. And my view and my advice to leaders on transparency is you tell everybody everything you can up until the point of liability. Because when you get into organizations like Fortune 500s that are publicly traded, there are some legalities at play that you can't always expose to every member of your team, but you can tell them up until that point. So employees who are kept in the loop and understand their role in the overarching purpose and goals of the company are understandably more likely to put their trust in their employer. And people crave relating to their leaders. People want to know that their leaders have experienced the same problems and or how they've overcome personal hardships. I'm a big believer in people relate more to your failures than to your successes, and being transparent about that is so powerful, because it's that authenticity that we were talking about before, being authentic, being, admitting that you don't know everything. I mean, that is a powerful statement, and being transparent about that, or, coming in and saying, listen, we made this decision because of this. We know there are going to be some speed bumps along the way in the journey, but for the overall greater good of everybody involved, this is why we made the decision. And it really does change the landscape of your employee, of your employees and your staff's lives. So here's another anecdote. I had a client who was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. He made a huge mistake that caused the company millions of dollars and made the shareholders very, very uncomfortable. And the CEO was advised by his PR firm to say no comment at an upcoming press conference regarding this issue. Now, when he and I met in our one-on-one coaching sessions, we discussed it. And I honestly advised him to be honest, transparent, and truthful. And because I believe mistakes can be forgiven, but cover-ups can't. Cover-ups just compound the dishonesty. And it never turns out well, ever. He was extremely scared because he thought he was going to lose his job, but committed to telling the truth. And during that press conference, he answered honestly, transparently, and truthfully. And due to his authenticity, the board, his team, and the shareholders rallied around him to help him correct the mistake and put practices in place and processes in place so this didn't happen again. And what ended up happening was it didn't have the financial impact that they had predicted, and he continued on as their CEO for another 5 years. So it's really about being transparent and being honest, transparent, and truthful in everything. Because again, putting out that energy, you're going to get that back. So number 3 is accountability. This quote really struck me. Leaders inspire accountability through their ability to accept the responsibility before they place blame. So it's about, I made this choice. This was the outcome. And and it was not the outcome that I wanted, but I'm taking responsibility for that. You know, the most important result of accountability, again, I told you these were going to be building blocks, is trust, which is essential in any relationship. Being accountable to something means you're willing to make commitments and be responsible for your own actions, which promotes trust between you and the people around you. Accountability eliminates the time and effort you spend on distracting activities and other unproductive behavior. It really, when you make people accountable for their actions, you're effectively teaching them how to value their work. You know, it's really, really important for people to be connected to the mission and value of their work, and accountability fosters that. And when done right, accountability can increase your team members' skills and confidence, because, you know they've made a promise and they have to deliver on that promise. But the key to accountability within an organization is to provide the right support, to give constructive feedback, to improve your members' suggestions, to give them freedom to decide, and challenges them to think of better solutions as a team. So this is another anecdote that, I'm actually allowed to share the company. I have an airtight NDA with all my clients to make sure that they feel, protected and feel safe with me, because I share a lot of, they share a lot of secrets with me, for lack of a better word, which is why, I'm allowed to share some of the stories, but not their names, but with this one I can. So I just wrapped a 11-month contract with the City of Philadelphia Planning and Development Department. The assignment was to merge 9 government agencies into one, and each organization was 50 years in age plus. The department had attempted to accomplish this merger over the course of 20 years, failing time after time. And in August of 2019, during the beginning of our time together, because I spent a lot of one-on-one time with each member of the leadership team, it was clear that trust and accountability was not present for each member of this leadership team. One of our commitments as a team was to create a mission and vision statement for them, just for the 9 that we were working with. And it ended up becoming the mission and vision statement for the new entity. Now, you really have to understand what was at play here with these 9 entities. We had, not only those 9 entities and all of those staff members to be accountable to, but we had city council, we had the mayor, we had the unions, we had the press. So we had all of these outside external pressures really kind of putting us under the microscope. And it was a challenge, but like I said, one of our commitments was to hold each other accountable. It was to hold each other accountable to the commitments we made within the vision and mission statement of the team. And as we moved through the process of merging these agencies, as you can imagine, many of these people that I was working with had worked 20 plus years for the city, and a lot of insecurities and challenges arose, and we addressed them head on as a team. These were times when members wanted to quit, honestly, and give up and didn't want to do it. But instead, they continued to hold each other accountable to the agreements they created at the beginning of the process. And on July 1st, just a couple of weeks ago, the team unveiled the new agency. No jobs were cut. And the team came up with a cohesive structure that impressed their harshest critics, the members of City Council. So in the next couple of weeks, if you're in the city of Philadelphia, start looking for that new branding of, the new organization. It's really exciting, and it's an innovation within city government, because this doesn't happen as quickly as we did it. We did it in 11 months where they were trying for 20 years. So that was really exciting. All right. So the next one, the next essential building block for effective leadership is commitment. And I love this quote. I love Jim Rohn. He's a brilliant guy. Motivation is what gets you started, but commitment is what keeps you going. And as a woman who struggled with her weight and probably lost 2 tons over my lifetime, when I'm committed to, taking care of myself and going to to work out, I've been able to release 75 pounds because I was committed to making a change in my life. And I think many of us have experienced what the power of commitment can do. It's such an exciting thing if you commit to something. So, successful managers and successful leaders all excel in the making, honoring, and remaking of commitments. So think about that. The making, honoring, and remaking of commitments. So as we moved through the process of merging those 9 agencies, there were times we had to pivot on our commitments and readjust them because they evolved as the agency and the process did. Managerial commitments can take many forms, from capital investments to hiring decisions to public statements, but each commitment exerts both immediate and enduring influence on a company. It's, over time, in combination, a leader's commitments shape a business's identity, define its strengths and weaknesses, establish its opportunities and limitations, and sets its direction. Sometimes just the signal sent by a major commitment, an investment in production capacity or brand recognition, can freeze competitors in its tracks because they look at their competition and say, oh my gosh, they are so committed that nothing's going to break that commitment. And, they'll just back down. I've seen it happen time and time again where a competitor has thrown up what is clearly, an adjusted version of what their competitor has thrown up. And because one is more committed than the other, one of them will just simply fade away into the moonlight. It's amazing to watch, but I've seen it time and time again. So let me give you an example. One of my first clients in 2009 was the COO of a new tech startup. And I always gift people a demo coaching session so they can experience what it's like to work with me, kind of like test driving a car. And he was blown away. But his issue was money. He said to me, I really don't have this your fee right now, but in 2 weeks, give me 2 weeks and I'll be your client. And honestly, I was really skeptical because I've heard that many, many times. And 2 weeks later, on the dot, I got a call from him, and he said, not only did he want to become my client, the CEO of his organization became my client. And I said to him, wow, I didn't realize that you embodied the power of this power of commitment within you. I honestly didn't believe it. And his response to me was this fable that I'm sure you've probably heard, but I love it. And it's called The Pig and the Chicken. And he said, a pig and a chicken are walking down the road, and the chicken says, hey, pig, I think we should open a restaurant. And the pig replies, maybe, what would we call it? And the chicken responds, how about ham and eggs? And the pig thinks for a moment and says, no, thanks. I'd be committed, but you'd be involved. So you see the level. It's that depth of commitment that can really drive things forward, and it all builds back to the accountability, the authenticity, the trust, the transparency. They all build on each other. So the next one is humility, and humility is a quality that is so important that Harvard has added it to its executive education program for executives, for CEOs. So humility, I believe, is one of the most important qualities behind trust. And this is a great quote. I've noticed that without the display of humility, others feel underappreciated and undervalued. And by constantly staying open and humble, leaders I've coached have dropped the use of the old stick of authority, and through humility and resolve get work done through others beyond what they had expected. And it's true, when you are humble, people are willing to really go beyond what is expected of them. So those leaders that are able to be vulnerable and open and show their humility attract that. They attract people to work for them that go the extra mile. Humble leaders listen to feedback, absorb it, and are willing to acknowledge the mistakes and will change direction if a decision turns out to be wrong, much like the city of Philadelphia. The last point is critical because 50% of all business decisions are wrong. Humble leaders create working environments that are open, transparent, and democratic. They really try to listen and invite people to voice their ideas and challenges on how to deal with success and failure. It's the complete opposite of claiming success individually and shifting the failure to the team. So that, that means like, oh, because we won this award, it's my award. They don't acknowledge their team. And then when there's a mistake, they shift the blame to the team. That's the exact opposite of a humble leader. With humble leaders, it's all about shared achievement, and that is not only attributed to the leader. They give up the need to be right. How many times have you had a conversation with somebody who's a quote unquote know-it-all and knows everything, right? And they're so hooked into being right that it really almost puts blinders on them to what is possible if they just drop that need to be right. One of the greatest anecdotes I've heard, and this was not one of my clients, but there was a study done, and it was published in the Journal of Management in 2015 entitled "Do Humble CEOs Matter?" It was done by O. Waldman and Peterson. And they studied 105 IT companies and found greater humility in their CEO was associated with greater leadership, team integration, greater collaboration and cooperation, and greater flexibility and strategic orientation. And also what they left out is it's more profitable. It is, more productive. People really want to be more innovative and creative when they work for a humble leader. I had a leader that I interviewed one time on my podcast who told me that, he wouldn't tell me because he was too humble. And that's the challenge with humble leaders, is you won't often find things about them because they don't like talking about themselves. But this CEO, who's the CEO of a credit union in Philadelphia, was so humble that it was important to him to give the woman who was so dedicated to cleaning their office space the acknowledgement that she deserved, and would often give her gifts, and just was really, not one of those CEOs that sat in the ivory tower, but acknowledged every person as a linchpin in the organization because he was so humble, and it really did wonders for the organization. And he ended up hiring the woman who cleaned the office as a member of his team because, he opened up and saw there was so much more to her than just what she was doing, which is incredible. It's really, really incredible. And then the final essential leadership skill is failing. And this is our great friend, J.K. Rowling, who brought us the Harry Potter books. It's impossible to live without failing at something unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you've failed by default. One of my favorite things to do is to really, when I'm having a difficult time in my business and I'm struggling, is I Google leaders that have failed and how they've built that resilience through failure. It's a guidepost of showing you that you're going in the wrong direction. It's one of my favorite acronyms for the word fail is first attempt in learning. It's all about falling down, saying, oh my gosh, that hurt. I'm not going to do it again. Okay, the situation presents itself again, and now you've got new knowledge through experience because you failed, that you can shift. I also love this, failure is nature's chisel that chips away all the excess, stripping down the ego as it molds and shapes us. I mean, the ego is a very, very strong thing. It presents itself in 41 ways in every human being, and oftentimes we'll get that inner critic telling us, don't do that, you're just going to fail, or your book should be perfect, or your paper should be perfect before you turn it in, or else you're going to fail. It's its way of protecting us, and it often will lead you down the wrong path if you let it hijack your life or your business. Failure gives us experience and skills, and shifts our mindset through the introduction of pain. I always say that, nobody's going to change anything unless the universe or whatever puts us in pain, because unless you're in pain, you're not going to shift. It's almost like if you get up in the middle of the night while, during sleep, and you go to the bathroom and you constantly stub your toe on this table in your hallway. Well, what are you going to do? You're either going to figure out how to walk around it or move the table. right?
Right.
Because of that pain. So
So we
um,
have two questions. Did you want to wait until the end or keep
I'm
them?
almost done with learn from failure. And then,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. Could we
Okay.
hold them to the end? Would that be good?
No
Okay.
problem.
That way we can all chit chat and I can give you my full attention.
Okay.
So, failure brings firsthand knowledge. It's a knowledge that can be harnessed in the future to overcome that very failure that inflicted so much pain in the first place. Nothing can replace knowledge gained from failure. Nothing. In fact, when I used to watch American Idol, when, God, I just forgot his name, Randy, I forget what his last name was. He used to always say to the American Idol contestants, nothing replaces the struggle. Nothing replaces the struggle. And it really builds that grit and resilience that I think is so important. The more we fail, the more resilient we come. And, one of my favorite stories is to talk about the failures that I've gone through with my business, making bad business decisions or aligning myself strategically with somebody that did not have the values that we had, or not. The biggest one is not listening to my intuition, and that happened actually recently where in my gut, as I was gifting a demo session to someone, my gut told me to walk away, and my ego said, no, you're a great coach. You can help her. And she was just one of those people that didn't want to be helped. And that had nothing to do with me, except for the fact that I didn't listen to my gut. But what it has done is, if that soft voice of inner wisdom comes up and whispers to me, don't take this client, you bet that I'm going to listen to it the second time. So, and without failure, we'd stagnate. We wouldn't grow, So let me just end with this quote. And I really, really love this from Whoopi Goldberg. She says, we're here for a reason. I believe a bit of the reason is to throw little torches out to lead people through the dark. And that's so true. Thanks for your attention and your presence. I'm grateful that I was able to serve and support you. And Lynette, I am ready for questions.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation with a lot of good information on being an effective leader, not just a leader, but an effective one. So thank you so much. So we have a question from, hold on, let me go back up. We have a question from Beryl who says, how do you grow your humility? And when is a leader a really confident when a leader is really confident, how do they keep the confidence and also show humility?
Oh, those are great questions. So how do you build your humility? I'm going to speak from where I know, Beryl, which is, from my life. So I personally have built my humility by being knocked down a lot, by, taking a lot of life's hard knocks. And also, I surround myself with people who are willing to give me that constructive feedback. In fact, Lynette, you are so blessed to have in your world, because she is an incredible leader. I mean, before we talked about a week ago on this webinar, and we were discussing, constructive criticism and how some people just are either afraid to give it or afraid to accept it. And for me, it's information to improve us. It's that growth, and it's that resilience. And, the more grace that you can build when you're accepting and listening to constructive criticism, or looking at your failures and learning from them, or not being that know-it-all and coming from the I know mind, that's really going to build humility. And then would you just restate the second question, Lynette, for me, please?
So the second question is, when a leader is really confident, how do they keep the confidence and also show humility?
So for me, I love the, first of all, when a humble leader is showing humility, you're not going to know it, because they're too humble. They're not going to shout it out. I mean, when I told you that story about the CEO of Ardent Credit Union, when I interviewed him, before I interviewed him, I called a bunch of his employees and I said, give me quotes about him. And I read them to him before I interviewed him, and he couldn't even look at me in the eyes. Like, he just, because that's not what it was about for him. That was not false humility. It was just, this is who I am, you know. And in terms of confidence, I always say to people, think about confidence as confidence whispers, arrogance shouts. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It
so
does.
You know, and Lynette, you and I have run into people during our careers where you just know they're confident just by how they show up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost that quiet groundedness, I guess. That's how I experience it. Maybe you can speak to a different, but it's really about, it's not about being a know-it-all. It's just knowing who you are.
Exactly.
And knowing what your values are, and knowing what your non-negotiables are. And all of that feeds into humility. It's not about, you know, coming in here and saying, hey, I know everything. And that makes me confident, because to me, that to me screams not confident.
Not confident. Yep. Exactly.
Right. You know, I'll tell you, I've met a lot of really powerful leaders in my life, a lot. And the most interesting thing is the ones that either have the most wealth or most power usually have something like a hole in their sock, mm-hmm. and they don't care. It's just because that's not what matters to them. Mm-hmm. That's not what it's about. So I would say to that question, you know, let who you want to be guide what you do. You want to be a humble leader? Be a humble leader. What does that look like to you? Mm-hmm. To me, that looks like letting your work speak for itself. To me, that is always being of service, being a servant leader, supporting people on their journeys, even if you disagree, you know, and the guidepost for that is, if they're not doing harm to themselves or to others, it's not going to end you up in jail or dead, then it's okay, because it's part of your life's process. Good. So does that answer the question, or?
No, that was perfect.
Okay, good.
That was perfect. So we have another question. Can being too humble make the leader seem like a weaker leader in some way? So that was by Rita. So Rita said, can being too humble make the leader seem like a weak leader in some way?
So, Rita, I'm going to say I don't think there's anything as too much humility, honestly. I don't look at it that way. I just, you know, I mean, if they're being humble and they're coming off as a weak leader, it's not humility. You know, let's go back to that analogy of, you know, confidence whispers, arrogance shouts. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Humility, you know, I go back to, and this is, I don't like to bring religion into anything, but this is a really good example. And if you look at the Bible, Jesus washed people's feet. That was the most humble thing a leader could do. He got down on his knees and washed people's feet. Mm-hmm. You know, the CEO of Ardent Credit Union, you know, spent time talking to the woman who cleaned the office space. He was not too good to be, you know what I mean? So I feel like if humility is present, confidence is there, and it never makes you look like a weak leader. You know, a weak leader is a weak leader. And if it's, I mean, I'm just going to say it. It's not humility.
Absolutely. It makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the comments that I made in the chat box was just that, like, you have to know the difference between confidence and arrogance, because, mm-hmm. You know, it's not really humility when it's arrogance, when the confidence leads to arrogance.
Right. Yeah. And you can feel them. I mean, like, Lynette, I would say you're extremely confident, you know, but
really,
well, at least that's how I'm experiencing you. And what I was going to say is that, you know, I've done my due diligence on you. You're highly accomplished, but through our conversations, it's never come up. You haven't listed your resume for me. You know what I mean? I just feel you as being confident. So, you know, for me, it's really about how is somebody showing up, you know,
right.
And, you know, and I've been around people who are arrogant. I'll give you a really quick example. There was an attorney who he described himself as baby faced, but he was very experienced. And he was telling me about how he's buying this bank of billboards with his face on them because it's going to build credibility with his clients. And I said, it sounds like you're stroking your ego.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I said, why don't you just let your good work speak for itself? I mean, I can tell you in all honesty, I started this business January 20th, 2009. I have never done a stitch of marketing. I don't know how Lynette found me, but it's probably through word of mouth or we are just starting to market now because my work speaks for itself. I mean, the way I got the city of Philadelphia contract was because one of my close friends and colleagues used to be an HR director. She left the city. They called her and said, we need to do this. Who do you recommend? And she recommended me.
Great.
You know, when you've got great work, it will speak for itself. Focus on doing good work.
Absolutely. I also like that you talked about trust and how important that is in a leader, and how it's important in order to develop trust, you have to get to know your employees. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to build a rapport with your employees through engagement. So oftentimes leaders are so disengaged, they're so far removed from knowing what the employees are doing, as well as what motivates them in the workplace. So oftentimes without that engagement, it's difficult to build the trust. So I do like how you talked about that a lot, and how those 6 skills are required, and they all lead back to building on trust.
Absolutely.
So that was a good point as well. I also like that when you talked about energy matches energy, because that's why I said you want to model the behaviors that you want to see, because energy does match energy, so that was good as well. So thank you so much, Kelly. And do we have any other questions? So please also include how people can reach out to you and your organization as well.
Sure, right there.
Okay, great. So as you see on the screen is Kelly's email. So if you want to jot that down, but again, I am going to also provide you with a recording of this session. I'm going to send it to you on an email. So Rita, I hope that answers your question. I saw it in your private message here. And I'm also going to send you an email with the HRCI credits included as well. So thank you so much, Kelly. If we do have a few more seconds, like 3 more seconds, if anybody has another question, they want to type it in the chat box or unmute your microphones and you can ask them aloud.
Absolutely.
And if you have any other thing that you want to wrap up with, that's fine.
Well, I was just going to tell them the quick story I told you on the phone about the leader that I coached at the specialty eye care practice, to kind of dovetail off what you were saying about leading with trust and being disengaged. This practice called me in, and they specialized in cataracts, or if you went to your eye doctor and they said you need to have a certain surgery, you would go to this practice. And they were a $10 million a year company that really wanted to grow. And the CEO brought me in because the COO managed 49 people in her office, and they were the biggest revenue generator in the office. But the challenge was 75% of the 49 were turning over every 30 days. They were quitting, and they couldn't figure out why. So I sat with the leader, and she immediately crossed her hands in front of her and kind of glared at me. And I said, "How are you?" And she said, "I'm fine." And I said, "Really? Because you seem a little angry." And she just started to cry. And I said, "Listen, I'm not here to judge you. That is not my job. My job is to observe and just to ask questions and point out what I notice. And I just noticed this. And if I'm noticing this within the first 10 minutes of meeting you, I guarantee your employees are feeling it too." And she went through some things that were going on that were very painful for her in her life. And what it ended up coming down to was her employees got their raises, salary bumps, and other bonuses based on quarterly evaluations that she was supposed to give them. And she hadn't done it in 18 months. due to everything that was going on in her life because she was so disengaged. And the assignment I gave her was to sit down with each of the 49 employees with no agenda and ask one question. And the question was, how are you? And just to shut up and listen to what they said. And she panicked because she was one of those people that was very type A and liked agendas. And I said, no agenda, you just need to be present. So she called me about a month after, she finished, and she said, they're all done. And I learned a lot about my employees. And then the next month, next 2 months, we caught her up on the evaluations. And by the end of the year, their level of attrition dropped from 75% to 15%. And they beat their budget by $5 million. So normally they used to come in at $10 million of revenue a year. They came in at $5. And it was just because of that exercise and getting to know her employees.
Mm-hmm.
So
it makes a difference. It really does. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And Kelly, again, she has an organization called You Loud and Clear. So youloudandclear.com is how you can contact Kelly, as well as at kelly@kellymeerbott.com. So thank you, Kelly, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone, for joining us as well.
Thank you. And Lynette, I hope our paths cross again. You keep up your great work.
Thank you. They definitely will. And you do the same.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. Enjoy your vacation.
Thank you.